Hi, I'm Sharon Azrieli, and thank you so much for joining me again in this, our second video in the series, Canadian by Design. Welcome to my home in Canada for At Home in Canada. At 93, Frank Gehry is arguably the most famous architect in the world. He has evolved past postmodernism, which you will hear that he hates, to an art form of architecture that is uniquely his own. He is a soft-spoken, affable, kind man that everybody loves to work with. He has a huge office in Los Angeles, and it was just a joy to go and meet with him on June the 3rd, 2019. So I've done a little bit of research, as much as I could, because your work is so vast. And what is the most exciting thing about you, if I may, is the idea that you want to build for the betterment of humanity.
Who else do you build for?
That's wonderful. To make a better world, if I quote you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And you
It's hard to do.
elaborate on that.
Well, it's all the forces are against you that have to do probably with greed and money and things like that. But anyway, we weather the storms. And when we are allowed to build, we get the opportunity to build something special. It's like hitting the jackpot. If they wait long enough, that's when it pays off. If you do like Bilbao, over 4 billion euros since it opened.
And it also transformed the town. And it,
Yeah,
what
so
they call the
architecture
Bilbao
do that.
effect.
Yeah, but all buildings. I mean, Corbusier did it. Frank Gehry did it.
That's who they're now
Kahn did
comparing you to, of course.
And many other young architects and people all around the world creative people have made a difference through beautiful buildings. Architecture is an art, if you let it be. It's been not considered an art for a long time. But in the Renaissance, the great artists became architects. Giotto, a great painter, became an architect. El Greco, great painter, became an architect.
Da Vinci.
You know, Michelangelo
Right.
became an architect.
Right.
So it was, it's a painter works with materials, musician works with notes, composer works with notes, and we work with materials. And architects are bigger, and we have to make sure that the buildings stand up, that they're economical.
That they don't leak.
They don't leak.
I've heard you say that a lot.
Well, my early buildings, when I was starting, some of them leaked because we were not getting the best work. We were doing things very cheap because the early work was very, very difficult. But then we got hold of it and figured it all out. On the day before our interview, I did a reconnaissance before I met Frank. And I went to see the Walt Disney Concert Hall and his home that he totally deconstructed and then rebuilt, the Dutch Colonial, which is no longer a Dutch Colonial, in Santa Monica. And I am so glad that I did that, because it's one thing to study his works and to understand them, intellectually. And then it's another thing to actually drive by, go inside, and experience them. Number one, the interior of the building is both pleasing to the eye, but it's also pleasing to the artists. You want to make, you can make something that's outrageous, that stands out. I think that Disney Hall stands out of its context purposefully but I wouldn't do that like for commercial buildings. So in New York, we did a tower, 76-story tower, and we created a relationship with the Woolworth Building and the Brooklyn Bridge, so that if you look at it, it becomes an ensemble rather than just an individual. In that way is what I'm talking about. So you take your cues from the buildings around you,
Okay.
and in the case when they're not very good, you try to make them better by what you do.
If I would look at Arles, I would say maybe that's your most art form, artistic. I think every brick is a brushstroke.
Yes, maybe. I tried to have that happen naturally.
So one of the things about Arles, which is so typical of Gehry and so fabulous, each piece of cladding on Arles is engineered and different. And it's because of his partnership that he has with the aircraft company that manufactures each piece. And so one thing that does is it gives him the ability to he can pre-design each piece, and so he knows what's going to be built, and he knows that it's going to be done on time, and as he loves to say, no leaks, which is quite amazing. And then the other thing that happens is that you get this building of just an incredible luminosity. It actually comes out looking like a painting. Each piece comes out looking like a brushstroke. It's gorgeous.
It's about what surfaces look like, how their colors. Like in Panama, I did a building with very bright colors in the canal, and there were reasons for it because it was on the Pacific side of Panama. Is Spanish colonial, so it has white and tile roofs. The older buildings. Now it's all high rise and stuff, but it tends to be on the light and the white side, um, and on the Atlantic side, which is 80 kilometers away, there's a lot of poverty, and it's an Indian population, and they're very colorful, and so I wanted to evoke them, bring them to this table.
Oh.
And it was discussed with the client, with the people I was working for, and they all agreed with that. And so we made it a colorful gesture.
I remember he got very moved to this day, how many years later, when he was telling me what started his whole train of thought and started basically his whole career, was that he saw an ancient statue of a charioteer, a Greek charioteer in Delphi. And he said to me, if I could be so moved seeing this charioteer, and it's 3,000 years old, he said, I want to create in an immovable object something that will move people 3,000 years from now.
The charioteer, 500 BC, Greek.
Yes.
I saw it 50 years ago when I visited Delphi, and made me cry. It was so beautiful.
Yes.
And I wondered if somebody, and there were many sculptors from that period that could do that. And I wondered if it was possible today in modernism in our world to do that with inert materials. Where can you bring feeling through the walls and buildings so that the building expresses feelings and engages you in a feeling way?
I believe that based on his, discovery of this charioteer and this ancient Greek pottery, Gehry was so moved that he decided that he wanted to, go back to shapes. And he found an incredibly modern way to do it.
As luck would have it, I ran into the Dassault company that make airplanes, French.
Yes.
They taught me how to use their software.
Yes.
We started to make shapes that were like fluid shapes that you could build.
Yes.
And the first thing we did with it was a fish sculpture.
Yes.
In Barcelona.
Barcelona, yes.
With the software, we were able to do it really quickly.
Yes.
And we were using that software for that sculpture. So nobody else in the world was using it for architecture.
And because he was able to determine exactly what he would need for the projects, he was able to build in Bilbao and other projects for under cost and ahead of schedule. And, you know, his favorite expression, properly with no leaks.
So when I was sort of discouraged about the postmodernism where they were just regurgitating the past, as luck would have it, I gave a lecture somewhere, and it came out. I never prepare my lectures. I always do them a cappella. So I started talking about stuff, and I ended up talking about postmodernism, and I just looked around the audience, a lot of architects, and I said, hey guys, why do we need to go back? Why do we need to regurgitate Greek temples? That's anthropomorphic. We could go back 300 million years before man to fish.
Right.
And, you know, I left it at that. Everybody thought I was crazy. And after that, I started drawing fish, and I realized that fish was expressed movement in a very beautiful way, in an architectural way. And if you look at the woodcuts of Hiroshiga, his drawings of fish moving are very architectural. And so I started to explore that world, that formal world.
Frank Gehry did something that was unheard of, never had been done before, just a phenomenon hitherto unknown for the city of Bilbao. He not only created a magnificent structure, it was beautiful, it was usable, it came in cheap, it came in ahead of schedule, it was easily built by them, but it drew visitors, you know, from across the world, and it was such a phenomenon that had never been seen before that it had a name. It became a name. It's called the Bilbao effect, and that actually went on. It, you know, became in the annals of architecture history.
I think budgets and reality and that is, and you want a building that does do what you're paying for. So,
Right.
So that's crucial. And then you want it to do something for the world. You want it to have something, some feeling, and create a sense of feeling. And
Which brings me to my next question, which is the idea of form following function or not. And in your case, it looks like form follows emotion to me. And yet, in the New York building, the idea that even though it looks like this wild and crazy skirt, those apartments have bay windows.
yes,
And so it's a fallacy in your case. That form doesn't follow function because every building, every apartment gets a bay window, which is so beautiful. And if you look very carefully at that skirt, it's brilliant. I love it.
So form followed function.
It did.
I think budgets and reality and that is, and you want a building that does do what you're paying for. So,
Right.
So that's crucial. And then you want it to do something for the world. You want it to have something, some feeling, and create a sense of feeling. And
one of the things I ask everybody is, what are you doing to give back to society? And I was very impressed with Frank Gehry. First of all, he teaches. Second of all, he's always been an equal opportunity employer from the very beginning. And third of all, he has created an after school program. He has about 300 or 400 students that in Southern California, an after school against dropping out program where the kids are given art and music education.
I'm working on elementary schools that have dropouts, fourth, fifth, sixth grades.
Oh, I
and
love that.
there are 300 of them in California.
Wow.
And I hired a young lady to run it for me. And we have 26 schools now. And it brings an arts educator into the school for a year to work with the principal and teachers and develop an arts-based approach to everything. So if you teach, you could teach math on an arts basis. I've done it where you have kids build a city, and then they out of cardboard and blocks and stuff. Then you ask them to calculate the area of
Oh,
it.
I love that.
But by building these things, they're invested and they have an interest in it. Then they want to, they get into it. So it's a matter of engaging
That's right.
people,
That's fabulous.
and so we do a lot of that all across California.
So what you're going to hear next is really very interesting because everybody that's interviewed Frank before knows that he's an atheist, he's a pacifist, and in this next section, he talks about his upbringing where he studied Talmud, and that was fascinating. And he talks about being interested in designing a place of worship. What would you like to do still? If you can just choose anything.
I like the idea of creating transcendent space.
Even though you're an atheist?
Yeah, I really believe in the feeling of space. I don't have to believe that there's somebody up there. And who am I to say he isn't up, or he or she isn't
Right.
up
Nobody
there?
has any proof otherwise.
Right. So I go along with that. My wife is Catholic, and for a long time I went to church with her. You know, I studied Talmud when I was a kid, and those teachings are embedded in my memory in my life. And that's all about curiosity. And curiosity is necessary for creativity. So,
That's right.
and that comes right, that's the first page in Talmud. So I'm not dismissing the Jewish religion or any religion. I mean, I respect people's. So in that sense, I like the idea of doing spaces that they would use and would love and would bring people together.
If you can't choose one building that you say is your favorite for artistic reasons, then because people are arguing, are you postmodernist? Are you an artist? What would you like to say is your legacy to the world?
I believe in the art of architecture. I believe architecture can rise to the level of art, fine art, and within the constraints of the construction industry and all that.
But there will always be the one who pushes forward that envelope of the time, and that's you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor to meet you. Frank Gehry found a way to take today's technology and use it to build any form, any structure, anything that his eye could imagine, that his heart could imagine. And he actually did what he dreamed of doing. He dreamed of making emotion in a concrete form. That's what he wanted to create, and he did it. He's an incredible artist. This is Sharon Azrieli signing off for At Home in Canada. Thanks so much for watching my fabulous interview with Frank Gehry. Stay tuned for more incredible interviews, Marsha Safdie and Mike Holmes. Visit us at athomeincanada.ca. See you next time.